Hello and a warm welcome to another episode. My guest today is Victor Fuglesang, currently Head of Revenue at Ripe. We are exploring the pros and cons of adding self-service or product-led motion to an existing sales-led motion. What are the obstacles to overcome and what are the big benefits? Welcome, Victor.
Welcome, Victor.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So everyone is talking about sales efficiency, PLG, or self-service motion. So I'm super thrilled to dive into more detail. But before we do, give a quick context about who you are and what you are doing or have done in the past.
So the quick overview is I've been working with B2B SaaS the last 10 years-ish and been primarily working go-to-market. So I have an engineering background from the beginning, studies. Didn't want to do that when I was done. Didn't want to be a programmer. So I sort of fell in love with business and took my first sales job at a company called Meltwater, which today is multinational and well-known. But that was my sales school. So I worked there for almost 5 years. Many different sales roles, individual contributor, manager, and so on. Went through the ranks. And then I started to work with expansion into new markets. So I spent a couple of years opening up new markets in Southern Europe. So helping Nordic companies come down to Europe. Meltwater was one of them. It was my first try at it. But then after that, I worked with a company called Pleo, which was a Danish company within the expense management space, and helped them do the same. But then I wanted to get my hands dirty with smaller businesses. So I jumped on a couple of smaller startups that had their own challenges and their own sort of learnings from that. And now I'm at a company called Ripe, which is a Swedish sales, MarTech, PLG startup based out of Stockholm.
All right. And PLG or less sexy self-service motions are the topic for today. And in particular, we thought it's worth exploring. So what is changing? What are the challenges, the pains when moving from a sales-led motion into the self-service world? Why should you do it? And then let's dive into the challenges and pains.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, like any business, it all depends, right? Should you do it? Should you not do it? I think that one of the main things that you should always start thinking about is who's my customer, right? Who am I trying to sell to? And what is the level of complexity of my solution or my product, right? To even start to considering something like this. Just to give an example, if you're talking about a solution that is targeted for multinationals, big enterprises, very complex ERP, it might not be the right way for you just because of the complexity of, starting to use your product isn't that easy, right? It requires quite a bit of onboarding and handholding and so on. But if you have a solution that could potentially be standardized or templified, and there is a way for your customer to be able to use it, start using your product at least at the beginning and experience it by themselves, then it might be something to consider. Why are people talking about this? And why have been people talking about this the last couple of years? And there's a lot of content online around this topic, right? It's because there's been so many successful companies using self-serve / PLG as a growth engine, right? And a couple of names that you could probably recognize it, like Dropbox, Figma, others in the US, like for example, Pleo itself has grown quite significantly like that. There are a lot of good reasons to do it, but there's also a lot of good reasons why not to. And I mean, what are the challenges? The challenges are numerable, but if you're going from a sales-led to and start to think about introducing self-serve or PLG, I would say that there's three main buckets. One of them is it's a big cultural shift for a sales organization or a GTM organization to do that change. You have to think in a completely different way. You have to change the way that you approach your clients and your customers and the way you talk to them, which means that you have to relearn a lot of the things that you've done in the past. And I've myself been through it, starting out at Meltwater, where we only did outbound, only did cold calling, only worked in that type of motion, to then start to introduce new ways of doing that. It takes time and it's not always easy. both for management and for the individual contributor, right? So cultural shift is one of them. And we can go into more details if you're interested in that. The other one is just process and technology, right? The tools that you're using, the processes that you have, everything from, your tech stack and your integrations and your all the way down to your sequences. If we talk like super practical, like how are you going to set up your sequences for that type of motion compared to an outbound motion? It's completely different and potentially quite opposite to each other. And the last part is just the investment, right? There has to be a very clear idea that, or understanding at least, that it is a long-term investment you do. It takes time, just like building up a new marketing channel, for example, right? And the ROI of that investment might actually be secondary, right? Because there might be a lot of other things that you can gain short-term, like sales efficiency, right? Like you mentioned in the beginning. There's a lot of things that need to be very clear when you think about it from that perspective as well.
First of all, to sum it up, so you're saying 3 buckets: it's culture, it's processes and tech stack, and the third was
investment and ROI.
Okay, in terms of time and time perspective. I was wondering about, it might correlate with culture, is the mindset and the roles of the existing team. So coming from a sales-led perspective, and just thinking about the bow tie and how to measure it, it's kind of entirely different. So the customer journey is the same, but the way to approach it is entirely different. So if this is run in parallel with the existing team of a sales-led leadership, I would say this is tough stuff.
No, exactly. And I think that's why the cultural shift and the mindset, like you put it, is maybe one of the most important things to start speaking about openly. Because a lot of times, I've seen companies introduce self-serve from a ROI perspective. Oh, this will increase our efficiency, or this will be cheaper, or this would be that or that, right? And then they go into, okay, what do we need from a process perspective? And you start building out, and you do chart flows, and your tech stack, maybe you buy a new software or something. But then the challenge really comes in when you talk about mindset, is when people aren't aligned internally, and sales teams or even marketing teams or CS, whoever is responsible for customer acquisition, start seeing self-serve as a threat. They potentially say, oh, wait a minute, am I going to get less leads? Am I going to have less companies to work on? Is it going to be harder for me to hit my targets? I think that's where it's really, really important to start to understand and talk about what's in it for me, right? What are we all going to win by introducing this new motion or this new way of using our product, right? That's where I see that the companies that are successful with introducing a self-serve motion actually don't necessarily do it by separating, outbound and inbound, or self-serve and not self-serve. They actually learn to work with it in hybrid, at least in the beginning, so that there's actually a buy-in from sales organization that, wait a minute, this is going to actually make my job easier. When I talk to customers that might even already have tested our solution, that saves me a bunch of time. They already understand what it is we do. Then I can just focus on actually selling in the larger value of what we can offer, right? Or they use it as a tool in their sales process. They have the first discovery call. They understand that this is actually a good fit, and they offer self-serve, the functionality of testing the product, as a tool to make them, increase their buy-in or actually understand the value of their solution, and not try to do a full, super hard cut
radical.
Radical. These, if they even are touching self-serve, then you're not allowed to talk to them, because that's going to be much more painful.
I'm thinking about whether it's kind of product assisted, sales assisted, so all the kind of hybrid motion. What is your preferred term in this? Because I know there is a lot of terms and terminology flying around.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that what's becoming more and more common now is you're talking about sales assist if you're coming from a PLG world, right? If you're talking about PLG, sales assist being the natural next step of going up market, for example, or introducing humans into the process of them buying, right? But if you think of it from a sales-led perspective, you start with a human interaction, right? You initiate everything with actually a person talking to another person, and therefore introducing this new product or new solution, right? So the human assistance and the way human sales is there from the beginning. Then the question becomes, is it product assist? Product actually assisting then the sales-led motion rather than the other way around. And I think that might be a healthier way of seeing it, rather than you have one camp that is sales-led and the other camp which is self-serve or PLG. And they're just battling at each other, or you're completely separating them into different orgs might be. So that's how I usually see it.
It totally resonates to me, because we were still in the first bucket of how to kind of get slice by slice this culture change moving. And for me, it has a strong influence whether it's called sales assisted or product assisted. I'm too sensitive on that, but I would say to bring value, and you already described it. So if product is bringing value to the sales team, and you're talking to customers later but highly educated, or they have a kind of automated demo or whatever to sum up all the benefits why they should engage later, I think the narrative is really concise, and I really like it. But I'm curious to hear your expertise on that.
No, I completely agree. I think that there's another way of seeing it is also, your tool becomes your demo, right? Instead of having a PowerPoint or a interactive fake version of your product, you actually let your product speak for itself, and you use it as a tool in your sales, in your sales motion and in your sales conversations. So that's where the product assists, right? So it becomes something that is live. It's the real deal, which creates more trust and gives you more credibility. It's just not, it's not me just saying that this is really good. You can actually click around and try it and play with it.
Yeah.
But you can then give context around it, right? You can actually say, well, you know what? This part of the system is valuable for your reasons because you're trying to achieve X, Y, Z. And then they understand it in a different way when they start playing around with it. And they start using it. So that's another way of sort of mapping in how can self-serve functionality, if we call it that, naturally integrate into a sales-led motion, is by seeing it as a tool to sell for the sales teams to use it or not in their motion. And then if it happens that, somebody comes in, they sign up, they start using it by themselves, then it's like you said, you come in a bit later, but it's still the value of that investment increases in efficiency is quite significant, I would say, especially if you start measuring it from the bow tie and how things move quicker, right? And I mean, there's a lot of reports today and a lot of data showing how, sales cycles have increased, win rates have decreased, right? It's harder to sell today than it was a year or two ago, right? Because of what everything has happened in the market. So considering a self-serve investment from that perspective can be easier to digest sometimes than, hey, let's go PLG. Let's, shift completely from one way of doing things to another. And that can be so much more scarier. And these baby steps can be a way to get there down the line.
Yeah. I really like that change management, because I totally agree. So the landscape is changing. There's another buzzword, buyer-led emotions, and I totally agree. So it totally resonates to me, because taking me as an example, it's super, super hard to get me on the phone, or that I book a demo as a kind of entry point. Everything which is provided to get more information, to get a solid glimpse, whether with a individual demo or a self-service motion, I would be up for it. So I would like to speak rarely or very limited to people, and there's no personal judgment on it. The other thing I really like is, because at the very end, I think, and I've seen it, so this kind of change management and the irrational behavior, it's a very powerful obstacle to overcome. If you master that, and we were talking about efficiency, I would say self-service then has a really good chance to, together with the sales team and to discuss what kind of segments should be served with the sales team and sales resources, and what segments shouldn't be served. No one should be kind of interested in having these calls with two small clients answering again and again all the same questions. So someone has to convince me that this is kind of fruitful conversation every single day.
No, exactly. And I think that's where the change management has to be done in a very much educating way. And this is a challenge I think that everyone is, I mean, it's definitely on everyone's minds at some point, right? If you look at the B2B SaaS market globally, I would guess that more than 90% of websites today have a book a demo. No type of get started yourself, no type of self-serve. And that shift then becomes scary for people because you, like you said, you don't want to be talking to irrelevant customers. You don't want to spend time having a discovery call with someone that isn't going to even consider buying or isn't the right ICP, you know? So there's a lot of education around to make the sales teams comfortable with this, for them to understand that this is actually something that's going to help them talk to the right people at the right time and for the right reasons, right? And that should help them then have more qualified opportunities, close better deals, bigger deals, all these things that, as a salesperson, that's what you want to do, right? You want to hit your targets. You want to get to those revenue numbers for all the reasons that there is, right? So the culture shift is a lot about educating. And if managers and revenue leaders and company leaders don't themselves understand that, it becomes super hard to convince anyone in the team that this is going to be a good idea and it's something that is going to help them.
I would go even further. If you do not have this kind of openness and curiosity in that team, you won't make it, because there will be so much friction, so much visible or kind of behind the scenes resistance to make it happen, which correlates to your number 3, that it takes time, but it won't succeed. That's for me at least pretty sure, or the chances are super small. The other thing, when you mentioned, and now I can talk to a real expert on this, 90% of the call to actions in the software environment is book a demo. And we both know probably, or you have another opinion about that. It doesn't make any sense, because normally we know very little about that customer. So it starts with a disappointment, because a good sales person is curious. He or she is asking some qualification questions to then tailor the demo. So it doesn't make sense to me in a modern world that we ask for book a demo without having any information.
I completely agree. And I think that different companies are testing different ways to tackling that, right? One way is ask more questions and they end up with a huge form that says, what size of the company are you? Where are you? What are you trying to achieve? And which obviously then creates more friction and therefore more drop off, and you potentially lose the opportunity to speak to great potential customers. Or they're creating self-serve, right? They're allowing companies to try their product at their own will, at their own time, with as little friction as possible. And what becomes then the challenge, because yes, you can probably create a login, log into the company, create an account, which is basically self-serve, right? But a lot of the times you still lack a lot of information. You still do not know a lot about that person or that company and what they're trying to achieve. So what I've seen is that even those that do open up should already from the beginning think about, okay, what do I need to keep an eye on? What do I need to track? I need to understand what they're trying to do in my product so that I know what they're trying to achieve, at least an indication, right? So an example is, well, in our product, we have an API functionality. Okay, cool. Are you even keep an eye on when they're using that functionality? Because that might indicate that they're a bigger company that they want to integrate with something else, right? And therefore, they're a better fit from an enterprise perspective, for example, right? Or And I've seen other companies, what they do is they use enrichment, right? You start to enrich your data so early on that either you know who they are when they start land on your website, or at least when they start using your product, or when they like start doing things, so that you minimize friction, but at the same time know as much as possible about them, so that you can do this the correct segmentation that you talked about, right? Which takes us into tech and processes, right?
Exactly. It's a perfect smooth handover into but I won't stop you there. Just go ahead, please.
Yeah. No, exactly. So being able to understand who these companies are and who these users are is one of the core, premises to even start to understand who should I be talking to and who do I not want to be talking to, right? Where should I be spending my sales time and where should I not be spending my sales time? Which companies need more massaging or maybe more marketing material, right, to understand and get to a later down the stage in their buying journey, right? So creating processes that are more integrated with marketing and sales becomes even more important, because then you can sort of triple your efficiency by knowing that I don't have to email them. I know that marketing is going to do that, and therefore I'm going to jump in when the time is right. And getting that timing right is so important and is a big challenge, because you don't know when a user is focused on your product and the problem that you're trying to solve. And I think that's one of the main things that also is right now super important, because think about how many SaaS tools are you testing, are you playing around with on a weekly basis, for example, right? It could be hundreds depending on your interest, right? So grabbing people when the attention is there is hard, and it's even more important than before.
Yeah, and I really like when it comes to processes, because it's entirely different, because kind of classic world is you have the education part, where normally in an ideal world sales is stepping in, and then you have the selection phase or decision phase where we bring that customer over the line. Mm-hmm. With sales service or PLG, the sign up to experience the product starts in the education phase. So we are kind of still a long way to go that person is deciding, or that company is deciding to actually buy the product. Then, like you're saying, so to have the entire structure behind this, how do I sequentially getting more information about segmentation, which is then fueled back to or channeled back to the ICP description and roles in buying center. But how is the product experience tailored? Because they are super early in their own discovery, aren't they?
Exactly. That's where I think that your holy grail, or so to speak, or your source of truth has to be the customer journey. And it has to be the customer journey for all your go-to-market departments and functions and sort of skill sets and people there. Like you're saying, the product then starts moving from post-sale to pre-sale into the selection and education phase. That means that potentially your CS and your support function starts moving in that direction as well, which means that your sales team has to then not just like get used to the fact that your customers that you're speaking to have already tried your product or are testing your product. You also have to be aware of that they might even have already been in touch with your company before they've been in touch with you. And then you have marketing that also is layering on that. So the alignment across all these functions has become, it's not even a requirement. It's a necessity to make this work in a good way. Otherwise, you're going to create a very messy user experience. You're going to create a lot of internal challenges, and people stepping on each other's toes, feeling that, hey, this is my domain. What are you doing here? And so on and so forth, which can create a lot of conflicts and can spiral out of control if leaders aren't aware of these challenges and these potential things, right?
And I'm just looking at the time, and it's so short while with you. Just adding to this, and your third pillar is talking about kind of investment, and it also takes time. But I would like to flip it in the positive way, because if you're really serious about this, and we talked about the pillar number one in terms of culture change, mindset change in an ideal world, and I think this is realistic, is a chance that you, due to PLG and or self-service, all the different departments, marketing, sales, customer success, and product, are truly aligned, because it's only working if they are working together. And if they manage to it, they will talk in an entirely different way. And we learned that you can then build up two very efficient motions, one kind of entirely self-service, and then still a kind of motion sales included, whether it's on the new customer classic role or moving that part more into CS.
No, exactly. And I think that last report or data that I saw was that an investment in PLG takes 4 years to break even, or something like that, which is a long time, right? So I completely understand the revenue leaders out there that are very hesitant to do that investment, especially nowadays. So what I would promote rather is seeing self-serve as a stepping stone, that you actually don't do that investment because you're looking to have a short-term or even medium-term ROI of that specific investment, but rather that investment can feed better efficiency to your existing motions, right? That's where you can take it as baby steps. You can see it as baby steps instead of, hey, let's go. Now we're shifting completely to PLG and we're going to stop doing sales-led and this is going to be the future for us and so on, which is never the case, right? See self-serve more as a feature that is used in your go-to-market motion, existing go-to-market motions. Understand how that is going to be able to create positive effects and synergies and all the things that we've talked about, rather than expect it to pay for itself, because it won't pay for itself in a really long time. So that's how I would challenge revenue leaders that are trying to think about this. Introduce it in that way rather than let's completely shift.
Yeah, really like that. And bearing this in mind, I'm super optimistic that you will find immediately or short-term efficiency improvements along the line, which then gets this positive momentum in. There is definitely a benefit for the existing motions and the existing stakeholders, instead of, like we started with, there might be a threat to my current state of working.
Exactly. 100%.
Nice. That was super insightful. Is there anything to add where you say, okay, this wasn't mentioned, but it's essential to get it out here and now?
I would say that for all of these things to really work, there has to be ownership, right? Somebody has to own it. And I think that one thing that we haven't talked about is revenue operations as a function, for example, and how important it is to whoever owns that area, right? To be involved in this, so that it can be introduced in small chunks rather than all at once and be a huge investment. And I think that RevOps plays a very, very important role in this, whether it's RevOps or SalesOps, whatever you call it internally, right?
Please,
I would say that's the only thing.
All right, that's definitely super, super valuable. But then adding to this, when we're talking about RevOps, who should own it in the first place? So we have a sales-led motion. Now we're thinking about to introduce another motion or to increase efficiency. Is it then owned by the chief revenue officer or any equivalent? Or what is the best practice? Who owns this transition or change?
I would say that it's good that if it is owned by chief revenue or similar. If it's a company that is sales-led, then that means that majority, if not all of the revenue, comes through that department or that function, which means that if somebody can sort of pull the handbrake and stop everything, or create that friction internally, that would make everything go to waste or not successful, it would be that team. So if it can come from there, that's always better. I haven't seen it really work that well when it comes from anywhere else, to be honest.
I have the same experience. It's a great ending, so we could continue for hours, I would say. Last but not least, the personal question: what are you learning currently which you do not master yet?
Personally, I mean, we're working at a very small startup right now, so time management is always a challenge. There are so many things to be done, so many different areas that needs work. Everything from marketing to sales to CS, right? So mastering that balance and that priority is a constant struggle, I would say.
Yeah, and it's a constant learning opportunity. So
yeah,
thanks for sharing this as well, Victor. It was a pleasure. It was so insightful. We will add your LinkedIn profile, and then I wish you a wonderful afternoon and the rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye bye.
Have a good day.